So really looking forward to the weekend. Obviously have Minnesota on the horizon here, and coming off a really fun exhibition weekend, played St. Cloud State over at St. Louis Park outdoor rink actually this past weekend, and had a lot of fun over there. So again, looking forward to what's on the horizon here, getting back into conference play with Minnesota.
Coach, you mentioned the outdoor exhibition against St. Cloud State. It was sort of, obviously an exhibition, but you did a lot with the youth teams there and the youth programming. What did that mean to your team to work with the St. Louis Park area and then also to grow the game of women's hockey at the younger level?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was actually the whole premise of the event. Is early when we were talking about it months ago with St. Louis Park, really just having an opportunity, number one, to showcase girls and women's hockey at a local facility, going outside, really getting the opportunity to play outside and at the grassroots where a lot of us learned how to play in the first couple of years of our lives. And so getting the opportunity for not only our players to go do that, but then also for the opportunity for young girls to come into the stands. And so I think that's one thing that at St. Thomas we're really excited about and passionate about, is really developing it at that youth level. And so getting some kids in the stands to actually see what does it look like at that women's Division I level, and showcase some really good hockey players and a couple of really good hockey programs to show them what they can aspire to be.
Your venue this week will be a little bit warmer than the venue last week. It will be Ritter Arena. You're playing the University of Minnesota for about the second time in less than a month. So what is the team looking forward to? How does it feel to play the Gophers so quickly after hosting them at home less than a month ago?
Yeah, it's certainly a quick turnaround, that's for sure. I think, like I said, we're super excited to get back into conference play regardless of who the opponent is. But one thing that is really unique is that there's not typically that quick of that turnaround where you see them at the end of the first semester like that, and then again in the second semester to really kick off conference play. So I think there's some advantages to that, there's some disadvantages, but certainly the fact that we've played them so recently, hopefully not a lot has changed outside of just getting your legs back and getting back into shape as you come back to break here, or from break. So I think the big thing is that big advantage is really that we can look at some of those idiosyncrasies, what worked, maybe where are some of the areas that we want to fine tune and tweak a little bit going into this second series here, but a very familiar opponent, not only because we play them often, but because we've played them so recently as well.
What's something now that you've seen the first half of the season, second half of the season on deck, what's something maybe from the first half of the season that you saw that you really liked from the team that you want to make sure they bring into the second half of the year, but then also maybe something that you are going to particularly focus on as we head into the final stretch? Yeah,
that's a really great question. I think a lot of promise in the first half. I think that, and we were just talking about this as a staff recently, I think that our program right now is right on that tipping point of belief. So we've had a lot of really good games. You look back to our Thanksgiving series, for example, and playing some top 15 opponents there that were non-conference for us. And you just saw this different level of confidence and conviction that our group was playing with. And so I think that that's something that we're really excited about, is the opportunity to kind of build on that after showcasing some really, really good hockey late in November and then going into the break there. So I think there's a lot of positive things within that. So we're looking forward to building on that. But I think that we're really looking to be a little bit more structured even starting here in January. So I know that January break is a really fun time. We always talk about it like you're finally a professional athlete where you're not in classes, but you get a lot of extra time. And so we're going to really do a lot of focused work around not only our team identity and culture, but how we want to play in the second half of the season. So like I said, we've got some meetings set up both this week and next to really kind of dive into that more specifically and talk about all three zones and how can we break those down into kind of finite details of how we want to play, what is St. Thomas identity going to be in the second half. And so I think as we get a little bit more organized, a little bit more structured as we go into January, that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Any early predictions to what that identity might be, just based on early conversations and some early practices?
I think a big premise or a big hallmark for us in the second half is to really come back to work ethic. I know that sounds really simple, and coaches probably talk about that all the time, but as a staff, we've really had the conversations over the last few years in particular of how do you build work ethic within a program, and how do you kind of develop that innate sense of wanting to work hard for working hard's sake. And so I think that is a really big principle, and what has made St. Thomas really successful early on in some of the wins throughout the first few years here is really coming back to that identity of work ethic. And so while that's not a specific detail of how you're going to play, that has to be really the foundational piece of how we do things at St. Thomas. I think once you have work ethic, then everything starts to follow along. Then you can start talking about defensive focus and how you're going to contain with your feet, good static stick position, and defend well that way. Then you move it out to the neutral zone and you talk about how do you backtrack on the puck, how do you stay above the coverage, how do you defend the rush. You look at the offensive zone, again, more details there, whether that's puck possession versus moving it appropriately, creating offense, how are we going to do that? So I think there's a lot of specific nuances within it, but really the big hallmark principle that we're going to be about is really developing that work ethic, much more so even in the second half of the season than we've showcased so far.